Welcome back. You are, of course, watching The Fix. And, of course, I'm Karima Brown. And we're in our brand new time slot. Peter and I are now early morning birds. We're not on your TV screens in the evening. President Ramaphosa this week, of course, decided to sack Tom Moyane as boss as per the recommendation of Judge Robert Nugent, who is wrapping up his probe into tax administration of the revenue services. And, of course, it has been widely welcomed by many, except for those in the economic freedom fighters, who argue that it amounts to an attack on black professionals. Well, to reflect on the decision and also what potentially SARS has to do to regain the trust of the South African public, I'm joined in studio by the former spokesperson of the
SARS
Revenue Service, my apologies, Adrian Lackay. Adrian, thank you so much. Welcome for joining us on this Sunday morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Karima. And hello.
Okay.
Yeah, how's it? Nice to see you, Adrian.
Peter, I'll give over to you.
Yeah, look, I mean, you're looking well and you look sort of happy, Adrian. This sacking couldn't have happened to a nicer guy.
Well, I've been sued by this individual before, so I must watch my words carefully. Look, I think for the country and for the fiscus, as the President indicated in his affidavit on Friday, we need urgent action to restore the revenue service and to somehow find back the capability to meet fiscal targets, because we have seen successive declines in revenue collection. Yeah. It started with 7.3, it rose to 48.2 in the last fiscal year. And when we look at the medium-term budget policy statement figures about a week and a half ago, we're sitting on a deficit of anywhere close to 27 billion for this fiscal year. So as the Minister of Finance would indicate, or indicated in the MTBPS, we are running out of the fiscal space. And as long as the revenue collection cannot meet targets or, like in the past, surpass revenue targets, we sit with a problem in the fiscus.
What is the sort of quality that's required of something like SARS to, as you say, and it did on occasion, beat its own targets? I mean, is there a special relationship that you develop with the tax-paying public or with big companies? What did Tom Moyane break?
The shortest explanation would be public trust. And that is essential, because you are in charge of an institution that collects public money from companies and individuals and so on. And once there isn't trust in your leadership capabilities or trust in the institution anymore, I mean, the basic question is, why must I fully disclose my affairs?
But did he know that the people that were leaving, and you saw it, you saw one case with, I think he's the head of IT, was on a very embarrassing series of videos I saw the other day, where she clearly couldn't explain her own job. But she replaced a guy called Barry Hoare, who was technically brilliant at his job. He's now working. He's now the CEO of a new bank that is being started by Discovery.
In fact, I want to come in on the back of what Peter is saying, because I think this is important in terms of just linking things. When Barry Hoare was fired, when he left, there was a celebratory email that moved between Bain and SARS. And in fact, one of the quotes was that, "I'm really scared of Tom because he got rid of this guy, and this guy is untouchable." I'm paraphrasing now. What is the role that a company like Bain played in enabling Mr. Moyane to break SARS, as Peter put it?
I think because of the work of the Nugent Commission, there's much more information in the public domain now that we never knew about. No one ever knew that the CEO of Bain South Africa and Moyane met more than a year before his actual appointment to prepare for his appointment, to prepare the plan of restructuring, to identify who must be driven out of the institution. So it's part of the malfeasance. And if you also look at the MTBPS speech by Minister Mboweni, for years and years, SARS has denied that they are withholding VAT refunds to companies to improve the revenue numbers. In October 2018, you have a cabinet minister saying to Parliament he is concerned about more than 20 billion that are being withheld or has been withheld to make the revenue situation look better.
Than
so what you have is a dishonest leadership under Moyane. They are clearly deceitful, and you can't trust what they say. They even lie to Parliament. They put on record and for years have consistently denied the VAT situation. So you know, there can't be public trust in people like that.
Yeah.
And the consequence you see is that the best expertise have left the institution or were made to leave the institution. And collectively, you know, you have a situation where the institution can't function as it has functioned in the past because, again, referring to the President's affidavit, he clearly states there that the success of SARS in the past was that for years it managed revenue collection outperformed economic performance. So even after the 2008-9 financial crisis, our economy hasn't really recovered. It hardly reached a 2% growth level. But your revenue collection until 2014 remained consistent. Government could rely on a consistent stream of income. And that has all changed now.
Now, of course, the big question is, what was the aim of breaking SARS, right? Now, it's captured in the document called Betrayal of the Promise and After Capture, which is essentially that there was a counter-project at play to build a state within a state that would service and finance the ambitions of the president at the time, President Zuma, his friends, and his family. We, for example, see that all these other people didn't get VAT refunds, but the Guptas, for example, got their VAT refund. Who are all complicit in hollowing out SARS? And when I'm saying who, I'm not just talking about Mr. Moyane. I'm talking about the coterie of leadership around him, some of the public companies that are massive international companies, Hogan Lovells, Gartnet, and of course, you know, as we know, Bain. And how do we hold them accountable? How do we prevent the situation from happening again?
And another name to that list, of course, would be KPMG.
KPMG, I was going to say.
Look, their work was central to, I think, the professional services companies and law firms. They are brought in to provide a veneer of credibility, respectability to work that has been done. But they take instructions. They take very clear instructions. You must find the following. You must implicate the following individuals. And then as SARS, I sit back and I say, no, but a proper legal firm made these recommendations and findings, and therefore I have to act. But they do so for an enormous fee. And what we've seen to date is companies like Bain and KPMG say, okay, we've done wrong, we apologize, we pay back the money. But they were culpable in a much, much bigger exercise to destroy a public institution. And I would even take it further to say they help to commit economic sabotage.
Yeah.
Because at the heart of this now is a fiscus that we're out of the fiscal space to go and borrow more money.
Yes.
And the revenue generating capability is gone or either substantially compromised. And we as individuals and companies bear the brunt because we have to pay higher taxes.
Can I just ask, Adrian, I mean, if you're going to fix it, first of all, would any of the people who've been kicked out come back under the right leadership? And two, wouldn't it be a good idea that if ever you wanted to be an accountant in South Africa before SAICA, recognized your qualification, that you just do a year at SARS if you're an accountancy student?
Yes, that would be an excellent idea. I think
doctors have to do it.
Yeah, I think there's sufficient public goodwill of people who say, I want to give 5 years of my career to help an institution. But like you say, you need proper leadership. Yeah. You need to get the public back on board to say, we actually believe in this project and we are willing to employ
Is Mark King on a potential leader? Could he lead SARS back to health again if he was given the opportunity?
He's certainly experienced enough. I think he's trying very hard. But at the heart of it, because it's a public institution, you need the right kind of political leadership.
Yeah.
Now, Adrian, I mean, we've spoken a lot. I have spoken to you a lot because you're also, of course, the Minister for Public Enterprises, as a spokesperson. But there's a couple of individuals whose lives were completely destroyed and who still actually face criminal charges. That includes Mr. Ivan Pillay, it includes Mr. van Lochenberg and others. How is it possible that we can have the President fire Mr. Moyane on the strength of the Nugent Commission's findings, and you can still have people being prosecuted for something that has been proven to be patently false?
I think it's part of the vindictiveness within law enforcement and by the wrong elements that influence the decisions by the NPA and the Hawks. We know that the charges against Pillay and van Logrenberg, for example, was brought by Tom Moyane. He's the complainant. He's out of a job. All his allegations and his obsession with the rogue unit, as the president explains in his affidavit, has been proven to be false. But yet, through his actions, this criminal prosecution still continues. It's very unfortunate. Going back to Peter's question earlier, those two individuals can play a phenomenal role, not only in SARS, but in other public sector institutions to investigate properly the corruption, malfeasance and theft that has occurred, to actually hold people accountable from a civil side and criminal side. But they can't go back because no one will employ them, because they're still being treated as criminal suspects before court.
But this brings me to a bigger question. There's an enormous pushback. The president has made a lot of strides, Peter, in pushing back on state capture. But there's also enclaves which he seems to not be able to get to, where people are still able to maneuver. And the NPA seems to be that. We're going to be speaking to Mondli Makanye later on, the editor of the City Press, about the man who's currently heading up the NPA, who's now caught up in a sex scandal. And of course, we have someone like Mwiponi Noko, who is overseeing the charges against President Jacob Zuma, but who has a terrible record. She's the one who, for example, litigated against Johan Boysen, who is going to be giving evidence in front of the commission. He's the former head of the Hawks. She, in fact, charged the judge president of KwaZulu-Natal, and of course made Edward Zuma's friends' cases disappear, and one of the first ladies. So the problem is not just that they are facing these charges, but the cleanup isn't reaching spaces where it ought to be reaching, because the Hawks clearly are moving, even in the VBS case, for example, but no one is being charged. And that is what the public is interested in. Who's going to be charged? Who's going to have to answer in court? And who's possibly going to go to jail?
Yeah, law enforcement was hollowed out, those institutions in particular, the Hawks and the NPA, for a very long time. And I think it's going to take a very long time to rebuild capability there, but also to get the right kind of ethical leadership. Look, I think the president acts decisively within the timeframes that he's been in office and within what the law allows. But the NPA and the Hawks, in my view, it's a much longer project, because like SARS, they've also lost critical skills. They've lost some of the best investigators, prosecutors, and people with the moral authority to say, I'm not going to be swayed by politics in one way or another. I'm going to do my job. If I need to prosecute a matter, it will be on the basis or the merits of a case. That kind of people either left, or they were like Johan Boysen in the Hawks and Anwar Dramat. They were removed from those institutions politically, also based on false accusations and false allegations. So it will take some time. I think what we see now, for example, in public enterprises, in the SOEs, when you want to deal with people, when you want to remove directors from a board who are complicit or implicated in state capture, even management level, people go to court and they fight back.
But they don't just fight back in the courts, they also have political proxies. Peter and I were talking earlier about the ridiculous statements coming from the economic freedom fighters, both on Mr. Moyane and on SAA. And they are trying to racialize this debate. We saw the race baiting of Mr. Moyane, but the EFF statement says that the action against Mr. Moyane is against black excellence, against black professionals.
Well, the same allegations are being made and have been made against Minister Pravin Gordhan. When you deal with the Transnet board, you have an individual, Seth Gadebe, who litigates and goes to court, and the next moment there are the political statements, you are against black excellence. The same now with Mr. Gama. The board took a decision under Popo Molefe to remove him or terminate his services. He litigates now, and what's the pushback? You are anti-black excellence, you don't give black people a proper opportunity, but you don't look at the facts and the history of how these institutions were severely hollowed out. In a case of a company like the Nel, which is another SOE, they are facing severe liquidity crisis, SAA, SA Express, and the list goes on. Corruption took place on a massive scale. And in November 2018, 18, you deal with none of the history, with none of the evidence in the public domain that points to this massive scale of corruption, but you want to bring these charges and make these, baseless allegations against people like Momoniat and others who want to do the right thing, who acts in the interest of the Treasury or the fiscus or our economy. So it's unfortunate, but I guess that's politics.
Just a modus operandi. I think we get used to it.
Yes.
And we'll expect it to happen because more people will be removed, I'm sure. And eventually, Cyril will name somebody as head of the NPA, and that person will attract some good deputies, I hope. There will be arrests.
We'll get on with the job. Absolutely. Adrian, thank you so very much for joining us here on The Fix. Still ahead on the program, we fill you in on the news making headlines in today's Sunday papers.